Let's get this thing started. So good morning, everyone. What a lovely day, isn't it? Thank you all for being here. My name is Pitzel Kotova, and I am the Director of Institutional Assessment here at Murray State. Welcome to our office's first ever Institutional Assessment Learning Series. Just a little bit of a background. This initiative stems from our recent survey findings, which basically indicated a strong interest in learning opportunities about outcomes assessment. Our aim is to share peer-led best practices and experiences in outcomes assessment with, fellow assessment coordinators, faculty, and even staff. And we hope through this sharing, we'll be able to provide practical insights and inspire other colleagues across campus. All right, so without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce our first presenter for today, Dr. Nikki Gaylord. Dr. Gaylord is an associate professor of speech-language pathology who also happens to be the program coordinator of that said program. Dr. Gaylord will be sharing insights about her program's assessment process, which is titled Faculty-Driven Program Assessment, Planning, and Reporting. All right, Dr. Gaylord, the floor is yours.
Thanks and welcome everybody. I was excited to be asked to present. I am one of the primary faculty in our graduate program, and I do all of the planning and reporting for our department as far as assessment. And so I'm excited to kind of tell you a little bit about what we do here in our department, and it has made things quite streamlined when it comes to doing our assessment and then also planning for the next year and then reporting our findings. So let's see, just a little bit about me. I teach in the speech-language pathology graduate program. So here at Murray State, and a lot of people don't realize this, that we have a communication disorders undergraduate program, and then we also have a speech-language pathology graduate program. So our students that come through the master's program here will be they will work through certification and licensure and become certified speech-language pathologists. We have in our each year, we start two new cohorts of students. And so we typically have 56 total graduate students in the program. So 28 in each year. And so we have 28 first years and 28 second years. And we try to look at a lot of different things in our graduate program, but a lot of what we do is driven by other organizations. And so I'm going to talk just a little bit about that once we get started. So the learning objectives that I came up with, so first be able to generate some kind of rubric or rating scale that you could use to evaluate multiple PLOs. And that was one thing that our program is lucky to have. We do have a tool, and I'm going to show you that tool that we use. Participants will be able to state 2 ways to use that one tool to target multiple PLOs, and then be able to reflect on how to implement a data retreat for faculty to then take ownership of those assessment activities that you do within your program. So first of all, I just kind of went back to why does CDI or why does our program need assessment? For one thing, we are accredited through the CAA, or the Council for Accreditation in Audiology and Speech-Language Pathology. And so in order to maintain our accreditation, which we actually just passed successfully last year for 7 years, so we were happy about that, we have to meet the standards that are set forth by the CAA, the CFCC, and the American Speech-Language Hearing Association. So not only do we have to meet the high standards set by Murray State and those Murray State's institutional goals, but we also have several organizations that we have to answer to and to make sure that we are following those standards as well. And they set the standards that our students have to come out of our program having. And so it makes it very easy for us to look at, okay, do they have the foundational skills? Do they have the assessment skills and the treatment skills that they need? I do like the CAA actually defines assessment in relation to a program or program outcomes as ongoing measurement during educational preparation for the purpose of improving student learning and performance. And I feel like that is such a, that definition of assessment resonates with me just simply because, you know, not only do we have to meet all of those standards, but our students actually have to take a praxis exam prior to entering into the field and being certified and obtaining licensure. So we use our assessment tool here in this program, and we look at those very specific areas that praxis exam tests so that we can correlate what we are teaching in class to the standards, but then also what these students are expected to know when they go to take that exam. And so we are lucky because I believe it was two speech-language pathologists actually came up with this specific tool. This is called Calypso, and I don't know the exact year it was created, but it was created by speech-language pathologists who were supervising students. And so it's an online secure service that we use for our students. Our students do pay a small fee when they come into the graduate program so that they have access to this tool as well. And the way that they use it is it helps them keep track of the hours they have obtained in their clinical practicums as they move through our graduate program. But the way that we use it is we use it for assessing student performance. And so you can see here, we have a performance rating scale, and 1 is unacceptable, 2 is emerging, 3 developing, 4 meets performance expectations, and 5 is exceeds. And so we rate our students' performance in the clinic. And, you know, while they're working with clients and working in the preschools, and we rate them on their performance. And I do enjoy too here that under each of these little skills that we are assessing them, it does relate back to the standards that we have to meet. So the creators of this tool put that in there, which is really helpful. But you can see this is a little bit bigger version. So we typically go in and we are going to rate the students. We also, with this, we use quarter increments. So you can use like 2.25, 2.5, you know, 2.75. And that does help the scale be a little bit more sensitive. And that was something actually we have learned over the course of our assessment process. When we go back and reflect on the use of this tool, we sit down as a faculty and we're able to, you know, say, okay, well, you rated this here. Tell me why you rated that. And so really kind of going back and revisiting that rating scale and making sure that we're all on the same page as how we would use that and how we are rating the students. So it has been really helpful for us in the assessment process to be able to go back and just reflect a little bit on why we are scoring a student a certain way, or what may have brought about a certain score or a certain rating for that student. And so what's nice about this tool as well is that it provides an average. So if I'm working with a client and I'm supervising a student that maybe they have a client who's working on speech sound production, I'm going to score any of these boxes. I'm going to use these boxes to rate that student with anything that they may have done in treatment, evaluation. This tool also has spaces for professionalism, clinical skills, some of those soft skills like writing and documentation and things like that. And so again, we use this not only to go over this with the students, we meet with them at midterm and we meet with them at the end of the semester to go over their score, but we also use this in our assessment process. And so I'm going to kind of go over the way that we do that to measure our PLOs. So again, first of all, I will go back and just say again that we do use this tool in a lot of different ways. And so this is something I think that you could potentially create for your program, you could easily come up with some type of rating scale that you would use across faculty and across assignments. And so what I ended up doing is I just went on ChatGPT and I created I just typed in, I said, give me a 5-point scale rubric for student knowledge, and this was just kind of a basic one that popped up, which was really helpful. So it created it for me, and I could go in and change whatever I didn't like about it. But like I said, this was a basic 5-point scale that I was able to create. This one, I did this one, and this one is more specific to what we might use in our undergraduate program, or we might use in our graduate program. So this looks more at professionalism. So the criteria, and I didn't create the criteria. I literally just put into ChatGPT, create a 5-point rubric or 5-point scale for professionalism in clinical practicum. You know, and so what was great about when I made the first rubric, it did ask me if I wanted to create more specific things. If I really wanted to be specific about a certain area or a certain assignment. And so I think that the capability is there to really make this very specific to your field and very specific to your area as far as for your assessment. But again, with this one, you know, it gave me 3 different criteria: punctuality, reliability, professional appearance and conduct, and communication and interpersonal skills. And what I really like about it is it's still using that 5-point scale. If you wanted to use a bigger scale, you very much could do that. It could just depends on what is going to work best for your program. But I like too that it gives very specific information about what constitutes a particular rating. And again, this was just from ChatGPT. So trying to work smarter and not harder when we're creating these things. And so these are just a couple of examples that I was able to create on my own. So the way that we use our rating scale is we set our measures, we set our objectives for a certain percentage of students within that program to meet a given criteria. So for example, we might say at least 80% of the students will achieve a 3 or better on that particular rating scale for maybe a given skill. And that's typically how we measure. And I'm going to talk a little bit about how we go back and we formulate that data, we come up with that data, and we use it. But this is an example of our goals, and I actually pulled this from our SPOL. So our 1 PLO that we have is students will demonstrate knowledge and skills of the principles and methods of identification and prevention of disorders, typically communication disorders. Our formative measure is by the midterm of the spring 2024 semester, 80% of the students, which are first-year grad students, will receive a supervisor rating of 3.0 or higher on indicators related to that outcome. So on that tool, we went through and we picked out those very specific indicators that talk about identification and prevention of disorders. And then we we get that average of those scores, and we look at how many students actually met that criteria of 3.0, which in that rating scale for us, that is an emerging skill, which is what we expect for the first year in our graduate program, because they're just really learning how to be clinicians. We use for our summative measure, so we use that same group of students, which I like because we want to see that progress. Again, with our tool, we're able to go back and say to them, okay, you received this score right now at midterm, and these are the things that I need you to be working on before you receive a score at the end. And that score translates to a grade for them in their clinic practicum. So like our summative measure then is by the end of that semester, 80% will actually have a supervisor rating of 3.5 or higher, meaning that they're moving more toward actual performance of that skill instead of just emerging with that skill. So that's how we do it. But there are a couple of other ways that you could do it. So for example, if let's say you had an undergraduate program and you wanted to use a rating scale like this, you could look at different groups of students. Or look at their midterm and final performance. So for example, let's say you had students in and I just made these numbers up, CDI 342 doing a specific assignment or working on a specific skill. And we would want 80% of them to reach a 3.0 or better, indicating that that skill is emerging. And then maybe they're doing the same thing, but a little bit more advanced. Maybe they've moved up, in Bloom's taxonomy in that second course. And so then we want to see them perform a little bit better to where that skill is becoming more natural for them. And so we would want those students to have a 4.0 or higher. So that's a way that you could use that with two different groups of students. But again, you could also just look at their midterm and final performance. We have one of our PLOs, we use our first year and second years because we know that as these students move through our speech-language pathology graduate program, that they are developing those skills and they're getting much better at them. And so we do use two groups for a couple of our summative and formative measures in that we maybe use the scores that the first year graduate students scored on a particular skill. And then for the summative measure, we use the scores that the second years scored. Luckily, we are able to use this tool. So when in our program, our second year students actually go out to practicums. So they're offsite. They're in Murray. They may be in different towns, but we're able to use this tool with all of those supervisors as well. So we are able, it's a very universal tool that we have. And that's something that you could do as well. If you did have students going offsite, doing externships, doing clinical practicums, you could, once you establish that rating scale for your program, you could easily take that and make that something that is a universal thing that all of those supervisors have to use in order to score your students. And so that's going to help streamline creating those outcome measures and thinking about how you're going to meet those PLOs for your program. So once we have all of the data, which it's a lot of data because we have a lot of students and we have a lot of supervisors that are providing those scores. Our administrative assistant has been phenomenal in that she really loves to do spreadsheets, which I love. So she has access to these scores and to Calypso, our measurement tool. And so she has access to all of the scores that were input by faculty and those offsite supervisors. So she and I work together to pull all of the data together, and then we determine those numbers for the specific data. So it's really dependent on those outcomes. Like I said, the example I gave earlier, we expect 80% of those students to have at least a specific rating score. And so we pull all that together. And like I said, she creates a spreadsheet, and then we use that for our discussion later at a data retreat. So every fall, we have a data retreat and we do this prior to submission of our new assessment plan. And the reason we do this is so that we can look over kind of what we met, what we didn't meet, and then we reflect on why maybe we didn't meet a specific measure. And then we try to either reflect on our scoring or reflect on the tool that we're using, or then also just think about the students that we may have in the program at that particular time. It was interesting for this year because there were a couple of our outcome measures that we didn't meet. And typically we have excellent students and we meet our outcome measures, but this year we had a couple that we didn't meet. And so we really had to look back and say, okay, we haven't changed anything with the tool. We haven't changed anything with the way that we're rating. What is different? And so we actually were able to go back and correlate some of those ratings to the GPAs of those students that were admitted to our program. So I thought that was really fascinating that we had a lower overall GPA for the group that is now our second years than we typically have when we're doing our admissions process. And so we were able to kind of think about, okay, I think this may be a reason why we haven't maybe met some of these measures. And so we were able then to plan and think about, okay, what do we want to do for this next year and how are we going to change things? Are we expecting things to be different? But in my reporting, I was able to say, you know, we did have this lower GPA coming in, and I do believe this is the reason why we weren't able to meet some of those goals. So yeah, at our data retreat, our admin puts together a Google folder full of documents. And so we don't only go over the SPOL data, we're also going over admissions data. We're going over all of the things that relate back to our students, because again, it helps us to kind of pull things together and think about, okay, this is maybe why we ended up having difficulty this year, or why we maybe need to change our outcome measure, and maybe change our ratings, the way our rating system, or change how we do that. So we're able to do that by pulling all of that data together and not just the SPOL data. So that is kind of the way that assessment process looks for us. And because we do have such a streamlined tool that people are used to using, we've used this for several years, it has become a little bit more standardized as far as a rating scale goes. So that's been really helpful for us. It's a little bit fast. I didn't go very long, but are there questions? And I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have about our tool, about our data retreat, or anything like that.
Hey, Nikki.
Yes.
Do you guys do your data retreat here on campus, or you guys leave campus to create a more inviting environment to talk data?
That's a great question. We do it on campus. Wouldn't that, it sounds so fancy when we say data retreat, you know, you think, oh, wow, this is going to be fabulous. No, we actually do it on campus, typically here in Alexander Hall. But we do, it's usually a day-long process. So we're able to have lunch, and we're able to, you know, maybe just celebrate being together and looking at all of the data. But no, it would be lovely if we went off campus and actually had a retreat, but that's expensive. So we just stick here to Alexander Hall.
It sounds awesome, though. I think that's a great idea. It's definitely something that I jotted down.
Nikki, I'm curious when you host that in the semester.
Typically, it is at the very beginning. So we know that our SPOL plan is going to be due in September typically. So we try to do that either right before the semester starts, or right as soon as it starts. So I think this past year we ended up doing it like a couple days before the semester actually started. And it actually was nice to do it then, because it gave us some time to just sit back and reflect, and we weren't so worried about classes and students, and you know, the students weren't back yet. So I think we'll continue that tradition where we do it right before, maybe the week before classes actually start.
Thanks so much.
Any other questions?
And
Yes,
thank you,
Robert.
Yeah.
Hi there. Thank you for the presentation, and thank you to the assessment office for organizing these presentations. Very helpful. My question relates to how you developed the skill sets that you made the criteria for. So I'm wondering to what extent the specific skills you identified were guided by the standards of professional accreditation, and to what extent you developed those criteria based on internal, let's say, pedagogical goals. Can you just talk a little bit more about how you identified specific skills and your rationale for including them in the ranked criteria? Thank you.
Yeah, so that's a great question, because if we go back to the rating scale here, like I said, this was developed by speech-language pathologists. And as you can see on here, there are standards that are labeled here. So if we go to the document from the CFCC and from the CAA, it's a document that we use that specifies every single skill and everything that student must know before they leave a program. So what we were able to do is, because the creators of this use this, or the creators of this are speech pathologists, and they know the CAA standards. They were able to tie those in together, which is great. How we end up taking that then to our classes and how we really work this into our pedagogy and into our teaching is on our syllabi, we always include the standard that we're addressing with a very specific topic or with a specific assignment. So we are able to then kind of correlate that across this tool and as well as the assignments in our class or in our practicum, so that we are on the same page as far as those standards that we're actually addressing. So we, again, like I said, we have very specific standards that have to be addressed and have to be looked at for each speech language pathology program. I will say that we did have good luck. We were just reaccredited last year. And the people that actually came to do our accreditation, they were here for several days. And because we did have things organized the way that we did in those Google Drives, and it was very, very organized, so they didn't have to pick through things. And we had everything labeled as to what standards we were addressing and things like that. We actually had no issues with our accreditation. We had no changes that we needed to make. And so we were able to come through that with no problem. And I think it was because we were so organized and all, again, on that same page of taking those standards across assignments and across the skills that we expect the students to have. I hope that answered your question, Robert, but I don't know if it did. If it didn't, let me know.
Yes, it did. Thank you for that information. So from what I understand, lots of your criteria were, or most of your criteria were informed by the professional accreditation standards, and that guided the whole development process of your criteria.
Yes.
Okay, thank
Yes.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, and then like I said, we just really started doing that where we put things into those syllabi because we wanted to make sure that we were tying all, in a nice big bow, tying everything together with those standards. And so that was when we started putting all of that together. And then it really, like I said, it looks very organized across all the things that we're doing within that program. And so that is really helpful. Yeah, we were given those standards, but yet we really tried to implement them in everything we're doing. Any other questions?
Hey, Nikki, could you thank you so much. And I like the way you tied it in with CDI. Could you just touch on a little bit on how this entire process ties in with assessment here at MSU? Like how do you have this tied in with the performance, program learning outcomes that you do here at MSU?
So the institutional goals.
Yeah, the institutional goal, yeah.
So in that data retreat, when we are going through all of the data that we have, we also discuss our strategic plan. And so our strategic plan for our department is built upon making sure that we are addressing all of Murray State's institutional goals. And so, as far as like retention and things like that, and then also recruiting students. And so that's another document. It's another piece of the puzzle that we use in that data retreat to think about, okay, how do we want to change? Do we want to change anything? Do we want to do things differently to make sure that we are following those standards and following the recommendations by our governing bodies, but then also trying to facilitate Murray State's institutional goals, especially, like I said, related to retention and recruitment and things like that. So I hope that that answers your question, but we talk about our strategic plan during that very same meeting. So it all ties in together.
Are there any other questions? I think I want to piggyback. I have a question, Nikki. I want to piggyback on what Moses Robert's question earlier. Regarding this list of skills here, since these have been standardized or developed already, have you ever seen these skills ever changed at all? And if so, what process do you do whenever there are some skills here in the list that have been changed?
That's a great question. And I feel like we have seen some changes over the years that we've used this tool. And it's been more related to not necessarily the skills, like the evaluation and treatment skills, but it's been more so with professionalism and with ethics. And so ethics has been a big buzzword in speech-language pathology. And so we have seen some changes as to how we're scoring those students and the different areas that we're looking at as far as soft skills, and which I think soft skills, they shouldn't be called soft skills. They should be hard skills because we have to have them. But what we found over time, and especially during the pandemic, and seeing some of those students that were those kind of those COVID kids, the ones that started their college career during the pandemic, we have seen changes in this tool in relation to that, because these were students who maybe started their college career at, online, and they didn't have those in class or in clinic professionalism traits and attributes that they needed. And so they really hadn't had that opportunity to practice those things in an undergraduate situation moving into the graduate situation. And so I think that we're going to continue to see that change, especially in relation to DEI. I think we'll probably see more of those skills that we have to rate added to this tool in relation to ethics and DEI. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions amongst the group?
Thank you so much for having me. And like I said, it was a short one, but I hope that it gave you some ideas about how to maybe streamline assessment in your own program, and being able to use that one specific tool across multiple outcomes or multiple PLOs.
All right. Again, thank you everyone. Thank you all for your time today. We hope you found this session very beneficial, and we look forward to seeing you again at our next event. Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.